Here's my lecture on plagiarism in higher education. In high school, what was considered plagiarism? Because for a lot of students, there's a difference between the standard of plagiarism you were held to in high school and the standard of plagiarism you will be held to in higher education. Most notably, the biggest difference is that in college, paraphrasing without attribution will be considered plagiarism. Many of you may have been told in high school that as long as you, quote, put it into your own words, end quote, you would be fine. That is no longer true once we're in higher education. The standard for plagiarism is much stricter. Plagiarism is considered to be using the words or ideas of another without attribution. And now I'm going to show you some examples of different kinds of plagiarism that I see in student papers. So here is a sample source. It is from a book on Shakespeare by this fairly famous Shakespeare scholar, Alvin Kernan. And so you can see the source here. From time to time, the submerged or latent theater in Hamlet becomes almost overt. It is close to the surface in Hamlet's pretense of madness, the antic disposition he puts on to protect himself and prevent his antagonists from plucking out the heart of his mystery. It is even closer to the surface when Hamlet enters his mother's room and holds up side by side the pictures of the two kings, old Hamlet and Claudius, and proceeds to describe for her the true nature of the choice she has made, presenting truth by means of a show. Similarly, when he leaps into the open grave at Ophelia's funeral, ranting in high heroic terms, he is acting out for Laertes, and perhaps for himself as well, the folly of excessive melodramatic expressions of grief. So here I have a scholarly source that comes from a book, and now let's look at a sample paragraph, say, from a student paper. I have my original source on the left, which I just read to you, and here I have my paragraph from my student paper. Almost all of Shakespeare's Hamlet can be understood as a play about acting and the theater. For example, there is Hamlet's pretense of madness, the antic disposition that he puts on to protect himself and prevent his antagonists from plucking out the heart of his mystery. Okay, it goes on. You can see everything here in red is word for word taken from the original source. So this is kind of the most blatant kind of plagiarism. We might call this copy and paste, or it's word for word, right? And it's clearly plagiarism. There are no quotation marks. There's no parenthetical citation. There's nothing to indicate that these words and ideas are not the student's own words and ideas. So if you were going to fix this, what you need to do is put everything in red in quotation marks and make sure you have parenthetical citation or in-text citations. So this is pretty easy to understand. I think most students completely understand what's happening here. If you see this, it's usually not accidental, right? This person who did this knew what they were doing. They knew that they were copy and pasting some things that were not their own. Okay. This is actually probably the most common type of plagiarism I see. I see people taking selected phrases. So here we have another paragraph of student writing, a sample paragraph on the right-hand side. Our original source is on the left. Again, almost all of Shakespeare's Hamlet can be understood as a play about acting and the theater. In Act 1, Hamlet adopts a pretense of madness that he uses to protect himself and prevent his antagonists from discovering his mission to revenge his father's murder. He also presents truth by means of a show when he compares the portraits of Gertrude's two husbands in order to describe for her the true nature of the choice she has made. Notice how here this person has kind of altered the order of the words or phrases, but that we still have little sections that are word for word, but they're just little sections. They're not the whole thing. Um, this is still plagiarism and still is penalized just as much as the first kind. How would I fix this if I were a student? All of those phrases, everything in red, needs to be in quotation marks. And you would need to have parenthetical citation after each sentence. So that's how to fix this. Usually I see this, I see SparkNotes, I see Schmoop, I see Lit Charts, I see gradesaver.com. Um, I see people who have clearly gone to those places. They have read about the text and they just can't think of other ways to say what they want to say. Or maybe they're paraphrasing and they just can't paraphrase effectively. But I still, in the school, the institution, and other instructors would still certainly consider this intentional plagiarism, and it would be penalized accordingly. And we'll talk a little bit about what those penalties might be. Okay, and then there is a third kind of plagiarism. We have our original source on the left, we have our student paragraph on the right. Almost all of Shakespeare's Hamlet can be understood as a play about acting in the theater. For example, in Act 1, Hamlet pretends to be insane in order to make sure his enemies do not discover his mission to revenge his father's murder. The theme is even more obvious when Hamlet compares the pictures of his mother's two husbands to show her what a bad choice she has made, using their images to reveal the truth. Also, when he jumps into Ophelia's grave, hurling his challenge to Laertes, Hamlet demonstrates the foolishness of exaggerated expressions of emotion. Notice there are no red words here. Nothing here is word for word. However, this is still plagiarism, and I treat it just as seriously as I would treat it as if someone had copied and pasted this paragraph. If you notice, right, Hamlet's pretense of madness, Hamlet pretends to be insane, prevent his antagonists from plucking out the heart of his mystery. He compares the pictures of his mother's two husbands to show her what a bad choice she has made. Where he compares the pictures of the two kings. And then also to the end, this is all the order of the ideas is exactly the same. And the ideas themselves have just been put into different words, but these are not original ideas. The fact that this student follows the order of ideas and the ideas themselves shows that this is not original. This is not original thinking. Well, so how do you fix this? You can't put quotation marks on it. It's not direct quotation. You absolutely need to put a citation at the end of this paragraph to acknowledge that the ideas are not original. Better still would be to acknowledge the author by adding another sentence like, Alvin Kernan provides several examples from the play where these themes become more obvious, and then cite the source at the end of the paragraph. Even if the writer was not paraphrasing this quite so closely, but still borrowed the main ideas and the examples from the book, you would need to make an acknowledgement. If even one phrase is good enough to borrow, it must be properly set off by quotation marks and have a parenthetical citation. And if you are borrowing specific ideas and examples, those need to be acknowledged as well. I know that for some students, this can be a difficult concept because you were always told in high school that you could paraphrase, but that is no longer true. You really need to make sure that you give attribution to words and ideas that come from other places. In addition, sloppy citation can also sometimes lead to plagiarism charges. If you have an in-text citation but no entry on the works cited, or if you have an entry on the works cited but there's no in-text citations. Also note, just slapping a URL at the end of the paper and nothing else people may accuse you of plagiarism because you are not marking out in the paper itself where those ideas are coming from. So you want to be careful, because it doesn't matter if the plagiarism was intentional or if it was unintentional and it was just the result of sloppiness. The consequences for plagiarism can be the same. And it's my job to have you ready to be held to the harshest standard for future instructors. This class is where we do plagiarism instruction. If you pass this class, you will have been assumed to have been taught this and that you understand this. So going forward, it's not my job to prepare you for instructors who are going to take it easy on you. It's my responsibility to make sure that you completely understand all the aspects of plagiarism so that if you are in a class with the harshest instructor who has the strictest definition, you will be okay. Okay, let's talk about what would happen if you do get accused of plagiarism. Your instructor will write a letter to the Associate Vice President for Academic Affairs, which will go in your file, and you will meet with both your instructor and the Associate Vice President for Academic Affairs to discuss the potential penalty. What could the penalty be? Consult your student handbook and code of conduct for more information, but it usually ranges from anywhere to failing the assignment, failing the course, probation, suspension, or expulsion. You can appeal at any point in this process, however. It depends on the nature of the assignment. Is this a short assignment? Is this a giant assignment? Is this happening in this class where you're first being exposed to things about plagiarism? Is this happening in a senior seminar paper? And also, I said a letter would go in your file. If there are no other letters or problems with academic dishonesty in your file, this will be really treated as something like very minor. If this is not the first time you have been in trouble with plagiarism, then probably it will be treated as a major problem because you will have considered to already be aware of what plagiarism is and what the penalties could be. Probation, suspension, and expulsion are extremely rare, but I do know students to whom this has happened. I know students who have been suspended for a semester and not allowed to come back to college because they had, in this case, multiple proven instances of plagiarism. So you just need to be aware that these are the penalties. Now, even given these penalties, 40% of college students have said that they have cheated on a written assignment. Why is that number so high, do you think? I don't think it's that 40% of college students are just terrible people, but it does seem to indicate that this is a kind of a widespread issue. The biggest reasons that students give for plagiarizing, they fear being wrong. They don't want to give the wrong answer. Time management issues. Maybe they didn't understand the assignment. Maybe they felt rushed. They took a shortcut because they didn't have enough time. There is ignorance, right? Maybe they didn't know that paraphrasing would be counted as plagiarism. And the internet makes it just really easy. There's a lot. In olden times, you had to go to the library and check out a book to plagiarize it. Now you can just, it's at the tip of your fingers. I would also say this makes it very easy to get caught. Um, that is usually exactly how I catch people who plagiarize is I just plug their sentences into Google and it spits out the sources for me. Well, if 40% of students are doing this, and it seems like it's a pretty kind of widespread issue, why do your teachers hate it so much? Well, I mentioned that there'll be a letter. Every time I find an instance of plagiarism, I have to write a letter to the dean. I have to have usually at least two conferences with unpleasant conferences with the student in each case. It's a lot of extra work. It really is. So also, we actually want you to learn. If you plagiarize, you're not just taking a shortcut. You're also robbing yourself of the opportunity to express your ideas and to learn. It reveals that you don't think very much of yourself, of your own abilities or your opinions, because you're not willing to take the time to kind of state those things. It also sometimes reveals that you don't think much of your instructor either. Most instructors will take plagiarism fairly personally, and it will make them extra grumpy. Um, I don't catch 40% of my students, but I do usually catch a couple of my students every semester. For example, in this semester already, before spring break, I had caught 3 students plagiarizing in my classes, and I will probably have another 3 at least by finals period. So I don't know if everybody's doing it, but I routinely have 3 to 5 students every semester that I am writing letters for. So please don't do this. Also, this is not plagiarism, but resubmission of work without permission. You write a paper for one class, you copy it and hand it in for another. You wrote a paper on this subject in high school, you resubmit it in college. Resubmission of work is considered academic dishonesty, and you will also have a letter in your file and have violated the code of conduct, and all those same penalties that applied for plagiarism would apply to this. Ditto for improper collaboration. If you, and this can be on a lab, this can be on a math assignment, this can also be on a writing assignment. This is also a violation of the academic code of conduct. So you want to be really careful how you share your homework. Every semester, without fail, I will have 2 students hand in usually a short writing assignment, and they are virtually identical. And I bring the 2 students in, and I say, okay, who copied whose assignment here? And usually one student will confess and say, I copied this assignment. The other student usually says, like, I didn't know they were going to copy my assignment. They asked for help. They asked if they could look at my paper, and I let them. But this student is lucky, because if the other student didn't confess, I would give them both Fs and say, you both fail this assignment at the least. You don't want to have to rely on another student doing the right thing and confessing to copying your homework, because they might not on plagiarism. If you have questions about these standards, please email me or text me or call me if you feel like you need clarification. Okay. Thank you very much.